You know, every once in a while when I record these videos, people on my streams are starting to notice, link to the Twitch down below, that when I record some of these videos, I get gifts while I'm in the middle of getting an intro done. But instead of covering the vacuum tube act, Aphid's sending me an... Okay, that rarely happens while I'm recording, but thank you to Aphid. I'm going to leave it in. Screw it. Twitch knows what I'm talking about, where every once in a while, I kill enemies a little too fast with a weapon. This has happened with the crit explosion melees in the past, and this is not a crit explosion weapon, but what happened with the vacuum tube axe is I happened to find, let's take a journey to the map, because I happened to find a water mission, and that's interesting because most of the 4-player missions are all Firestorm right now. Now this is super right now, like within the next month, if you're watching this in September or later, it's probably not all Firestorm, so I'm a little curious if it's going to be a good idea to release a vacuum tube weapon video in this time. But I uncovered this resupply mission where there is A, no healing death burst, which means chain lightning can go crazy, and B, ice storm, which means I'm going to be hitting for the most damage every time. And that combination made the vacuum tube axe one of those weapons where it was doing a little too much damage too fast, where I had covered most of the map and only had about 4 minutes of gameplay. So what all of that means is this weapon is way stronger than I expected it to be. Now I obviously mentioned the chain lightning already, and you've probably already been seeing the gameplay. The vacuum tube axe has a very high base damage, meaning my weapon is hitting for about 40,000 damage. That is about 14,000 more damage than the Storm King's Ravager, if you need a little bit of something to compare to there. And that means that the chain lightning is actually doing a little bit more damage than usual. So it's essentially one-shotting the normal zombies while adding up to do a lot of damage to the fatties. And I can't even tell you how many encampments I recorded today where they just died before I even knew it was happening. And I am so excited to share the vacuum tube axe with you guys. Now, it should be added that the vacuum tube spear will likely have a similar effect, and basically any vacuum tube weapon is like this. Anybody who's used the vacuum tube bow along with Stoneheart Farah has probably noticed that it is an insanely powerful combo. Now, that's a specific thing where her branching out does stack, and I know that this is a really old clip that I've shown before, but that has actually been reverted, and it is chaining just like it is in this old clip nowadays, and all the vacuum tube weapons are basically as strong as that, but they don't chain with Stoneheart Farah the way the bow does. I'm just saying, if you've used the vacuum tube bow, you know how good chain lightning is. And of course, the vacuum tube axe isn't any different, but it is wildly surprising to me. Now, of course, we are using Paleoluna. In fact, I'll actually get into the loadout here. If you guys watched my recent Armageddon axe video, you'll note that this is a very similar loadout. Like I said in that video, I try to do this for consistency. I try to use kind of the same build on everything, and I know that Luna makes everything good, but I don't think she was helping the chain lightning at all. And I actually have, Dennis Jr. on here because he's back from his expedition, and I actually have something really cool to add with this. Axe eliminations have an 11% chance to grant Rock and Riff, increasing your damage and melee attack speed. What I found is the chain lightning counts. I might have been misreading this. There could be a chance I'm incorrect on this, but from what I could tell, if I eliminated an enemy, I didn't always see that bonus activate immediately, but what was happening is the chain lightning went off, killing, up to 6 enemies is really how many it can hit at once, and if one of those enemies activates this ability, we're good to go. And that means that you are almost always, if you have a good enough crowd of enemies and you're not in a healing death burst mission, you're almost always going to have that ability active. So while this isn't a Dennis Jr. video, I highly recommend him if you have him available. And as I mentioned with the time-sensitive Firestorm missions, he is currently in the shop, so you could just go grab him right now. I haven't, because I've already got him in the book and I've already got one that I can use, but if you haven't purchased Dennis Jr., I definitely recommend it because he will make this weapon stronger. Now, on the topic of making this weapon stronger, let's get into the best perks for the vacuum tube axe if you're trying to optimize your gameplay. Now, first and foremost, there are actually other 6 perk options. I think the real MVP is definitely eliminating an enemy. In fact, I actually put this up to a Twitch poll to let them decide which 6th perk I should record with today, and without a surprise, everybody wanted to see chain lightning, but it is worth mentioning that the extra 44% damage to water enemies 6th perk is very strong. If you're only using your vacuum tube axe in specifically ice storm missions, which is generally recommended, you can do 44% more damage to those enemies. And I think overall, on average, the chain lightning will give you more extra damage than that. It's still an option, and it's definitely not something I'm gonna not mention. And if you have causes to affliction, that is also a very strong 6 perk. Much like Stoneheart Farah getting reverted to chaining along with the chain lightning like she used to, they also put affliction back to its buffed damage. So it's actually, so long as you're tagging a lot of enemies with your axe, going to give you a ton of extra damage. So you can only hit every enemy once in a big group, and they'll all tick away to affliction damage, probably dying from it. Obviously, chain lightning will have a more automatic way of doing that similar thing. It's still worth mentioning, and if you're using affliction, you can use the damage to afflicted targets 5th perk. I'm using the damage to miss monsters and bosses because I think that was the most useful. All vacuum tube weapons have a built-in stun, which you would have seen throughout the gameplay, so damage to stun, staggered, frozen can kind of help you, but it's not super consistent, so a 60% damage bonus to only some enemies isn't that big of a deal in my opinion. And if they've already been stunned by your vacuum tube axe, they've already taken sufficient enough damage to where their days are numbered anyway. So I don't really think that 5th perk is necessary, but it's totally optional. You can use whatever you want. I just figured the damage to miss monsters and bosses was just a nice 36% bonus to the enemies that are really going to give you trouble. Double attack speed, if you've seen my Masamune video or my new Ravager video, is absolutely the best combo to go for if you're running Paleoluna. The faster you swing, the more she'll help you, but if you're using Totally Rockin' Out, you might be able to get away with double crit damage. Just know that this thing has like a 0.9 swing speed, which is really, really slow, so even if you're using Totally Rockin' Out, maybe attack speed and 1 crit damage perk would be the way to go. I just think you need to swing a little quicker at least to get that ball rolling, so like attack speed crit damage would still leave you with a 0.77, but that swing speed is like a whole second. Mine was 0.9 when I was leveling it up. Looks like I was wrong. You are swinging once per second, which is incredibly slow, super clunky, and not something I'd recommend. I know that Totally Rockin' Out makes you swing faster, but you would need the ability to be active 24/7, and that's just not super practical. So I'm going to recommend at least an attack speed perk, but you can kind of change that up if you so please. If you're not using Paleoluna, you can try to do attack speed, maybe crit damage as well, because even with Whiteout Fiona and no crit rating perks, we're getting up to a 42.5% chance to crit, which is really, really high. That's nearly every other hit, and that's plenty high in my opinion, so even 1 crit damage perk will go a long way. Although if you're using Luna in the lead, double attack speed is the best way to go damage-wise. And then, of course, in the middle perk here, damage is just, in my opinion, the best way to go. The heavy attack was not anything to write home about. Movement speed and life leech and all that is nice, I guess, but I'd just rather do more damage and not even think twice about it. As for the element, I think nature is just the best one to go. It's really, really fitting to the vacuum tube axe theme, because if you've actually looked at the models of these weapons, they all have this glowy lightning bit in it, so it makes sense to run nature on these. I don't think any other perk would really make sense. So that just about wraps it up for the vacuum tube axe. I am blown away by how powerful this thing was. Again, there are a couple of things, like without healing death burst, chain lightning is super powerful, and I was in an ice storm mission, so it was at its best, but still, those are the perfect combinations for these weapons to shine and can really show you just how good the vacuum tube axe really is. And if you guys want to support the channel, feel free to use code Mista to checkout. It really helps me. I really do appreciate it. It helps me continue making these videos, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. I made this video on stream, so if you guys want to follow my Twitch, link down below, subscribe for more, and yeah, take it easy. And then